My love for horror probably stems from my early childhood. I remember spending countless nights glued to my television watching every horror film I could find. Even though I wouldn't be able to sleep the rest of the night, I still watched anyway. The rush of fear you'd get from thinking a killer would attack you during the night, or thinking a shadow in the corner of the room would transform into a grotesque monster was exhilarating. It wasn't until later in my life that I realized how real those fears can become. Horror never left my mind, even as I aged. A lot of my friends who used to be afraid of the tiniest things would now barely flinch at the sight of gore on screen. While it's true I have become somewhat desensitized to it myself, I never resented horror. That's why, during high school, I made an amateur ghost hunting club. Even though I was raised on slashers, I became enamored with the paranormal. Multiple television shows involving ghost hunters began cropping up, and after watching a few, I was hooked. I'm sure most of the shows were staged, but they made everything look so convincing that I wanted to give it a shot myself. I had gotten a few of my like-minded friends to join me, a couple of which simply played video games while the rest of us discussed possible locations for hunting. Places like the woods, the old creek down the road, and even a cemetery were put on the table. But I had my sights on something much bigger. On the edge of town, there was an old mental hospital which was active in the 50s and 60s. It had been shut down due to numerous factors regarding structure decay and rumors of poor living conditions for the patients. For some reason, the state hadn't demolished the building, and now sits as a reminder of society's failed attempt at curing insanity. When I mentioned this, my friends quickly went silent. One of them even flat out refused to go. I tried the age-old calling him a chicken, but he wouldn't budge on the matter. I looked around the room at the remaining members of the club and only 2 were willing to go with me. James, a large guy who actually lived next door to me. He was a member of the football team, a lineman. I always found it odd that he wanted to be a part of our group instead of kicking it with his football buddies, getting drunk at parties, etc. He once told me that I was nice to him one day even though his teammates were being mean to me. Truth be told, I don't even remember the incident in question, but he seemed to and has been one of my friends ever since. Sarah was the kind of girl you'd almost expect to be into this sort of thing. I know you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but she fit the part exactly. Short, dark hair, porcelain skin, black clothing from head to toe. Basically, if you look up the word morbid in a dictionary, you'd probably see a picture of her. She actually approached me a few months ago, when she overheard me talking with James about horror. Her and I spoke for a bit and instantly hit it off. Even though she looked a bit standoffish, she was one of the kindest people I ever met. Just talking with her seemed to make my day better. That's one thing I really like about horror. No matter who you are, or how you act, one small thing can bring many different people together. Summer was in full swing, so we didn't have to worry about school getting in the way of our hunting. We packed some supplies, James swiped his dad's truck, and we all headed out to the asylum to record our findings. We headed out on a Friday evening. The summer sun was still high in the sky as we made our way there. The drive from my house to the asylum took roughly 45 minutes, but we hardly even noticed the time. We turned off the highway onto a side street, and not long after that, the side street became a dirt road. We drove for another 10 minutes before the building slowly grew in the distance. Around the perimeter of the building was a large iron fence wrapped with barbed wire. The rusted metal seemed to almost resemble blood in the sunlight. The building itself was massive. It was a large 3-story building painted a dingy yellow. The exterior looked normal apart from a broken window here and there and some graffiti on the main doors. The sun started to rapidly fall from the sky as we parked the truck nearby one of the side gates. We gathered our gear, and James helped us vault over a part of the fence that just so happened to be missing some barbed wire on the top. Upon setting foot on the other side of the fence, I felt a wave of panic wash over me, before it quickly subsided. Once we were all over the fence, we approached the front door, which was now completely boarded up. With some finesse and a little bit of James's strength, we pried the boards away and opened the entrance. When we did, the building seemed to groan as if it hadn't breathed in years. We stepped inside, and the first thing to hit us was the smell of rot and industrial-grade cleaner. It took us only a few moments to adjust to the smell. Inside the building was pretty much what you would expect. Paint peeling off the walls, debris littering the walkways, left behind medical equipment and household goods, mattresses and frames. The sun had set shortly after we entered, so we retrieved our flashlights and began our investigation. Walking past the reception desk, I began to feel strange emotions. Sadness and fear swam about me, but I tried my best to shake it off. As we walked down a corridor, I heard Sarah call for us to come check out a nearby room. In the center of the room was a large operating table. Worn leather straps hung loosely off its side. Broken glass littered the floor. I took a few steps further in to inspect the surroundings when suddenly, a shriek echoed down the long hallway. We all froze and looked at one another, unsure of what we just heard. I walked back out into the hallway and shined my light down the corridor. At the end, I could see a shadow moving rapidly back and forth. I took a few steps closer, and when I did, the floor below me gave way. I crashed through rotted wood into what I assumed was the basement. I landed on my leg pretty hard as the pain began to radiate throughout my body. My friends called out to me asking if I was all right. I told them I was fine, but I was ready to leave now. They both returned to nervous laughter. That's when I heard something near me. A cough. The sound of something or someone clearing their throat. I scrambled for my light and scanned the room. I felt my heart swell in my throat as my light rested upon someone standing on the opposite side of the room from me, facing the corner. They were wearing what appeared to be an old white lab coat and dark black pants. Their shoes were missing. I struggled to keep the light steady on him as his shoulders seemed to rise and fall with each massive breath. Slowly, he turned. His face was grotesque. His eyes were held open with some sort of ocular device, and his mouth oozed black liquid. He slid a foot towards me, and this sent an immediate flight response throughout my entire body. I hobbled to my feet and began looking for an exit. I saw a flight of stairs nearby leading up to a door. I limped my way towards them. Even though I didn't look back, I could feel whatever it was inches behind me. I began ascending the stairs. About halfway up, one of the steps gave way and my foot plummeted through it. I dropped my flashlight in the process and screamed. As I desperately tried to get my foot unstuck, I glanced behind me. At the base of the steps was that deranged face. It took a slow, lumbering step onto the staircase. I pulled as hard as I could, and after one final tug, my leg came free. I made it to the door, and as I tried the handle, a fear I had never felt before came over me. The door was locked. I pounded on the door, screamed for my friends to help me. Then, everything went silent as I felt breathing right on my neck. I turned around and was face to face with it. It raised up a disfigured hand and placed it onto my face. I was feeling dizzy, barely able to stand. The creature wrapped its hand around my throat and began to squeeze. I slammed my fists into its arm as hard as I could, but it maintained its grasp on me. It was at this moment I knew I was dead. I would become another lost soul consumed by this place. Just as my eyes began to droop and my breath left me, the door behind me swung open and I fell onto my back. James quickly shut the door behind me and helped me up. As I gasped for air, I noticed something strange. The front of my t-shirt was covered in blood, and after taking a moment to make sure I wasn't bleeding, we all ran out of there and never looked back. Horror is great. It can bring people together, and the rush of being scared is amazing. However, there is another side to it. A side which you won't understand unless you go through something I went through. There are things that lurk in the dark. Things that want to hurt us. And if we wander where we shouldn't, we might never come back. My love for horror hasn't diminished, but I will enjoy it now from a safe distance for the rest of my life.